So tonight's speaker, Herb Sarawanabutu, graduated from the University of Glasgow in 1955 and joined Arenda Engines, where he worked on the Iroquois engine. In 1964, he became a faculty member at the University of Bristol, where he consulted for Bristol Siddeley and BAC on the Concorde and for Rolls-Royce on the RB211, obtaining his PhD in 1968. He joined Carleton University in 1970 and retired in 1998, having spent 10 years as chairman of the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering. He is a founding director of Gas Tops and the past president of Canadian Aeronautics and Space Institute. He is the lead author of the textbook Gas Turbine Theory, which is now in its 7th edition and has been translated into Spanish, Japanese, Chinese, and Greek, I'm sure which he all speaks. He continues to lecture at Cranfield University in the UK. Please join me in welcoming our speaker.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Well, it's a great pleasure to be back here. I did talk here last year, I think it was, and very glad to come back. So last year, a couple of years ago, I was helping a colleague at the University of Washington put together a lecture, and he sent me a picture back of a Mustang, and I looked at it and I thought, that's ridiculous, that's not what it's like at all. And then I realized how little I knew about piston engines. I spent all my working life in gas turbines. Somebody once asked me, have you spent all your life in gas turbines? I said, well, not yet. But anyway, I actually thought I'd come around here and have a look at some of the aircraft, and I found a lot of things that absolutely staggered me. I didn't realize how little I knew about the piston engine. Now, I grew up in Glasgow during World War II, and that's where my interest in aircraft started. And there were 3 absolute incontrovertible truths in those days in Britain. 1, British aircraft were greatly superior to German aircraft. 2, you had to have an inline engine for a high-speed fighter. And 3, only Dr. Goebbels used propaganda. And of course, all 3 of these were wrong. So that's where this starts. And so I said, getting the air in is not so easy. Now, I don't like the lighting in this place, but can't do anything about that. Now, the interesting thing is, if you look at the jet engine versus piston engines, in the jet, all the air flows for propulsion. And you want low specific thrust for high propulsive efficiency, and that requires a large frontal area. If you look at a big 777 engine, for example, with 9 feet, 10 feet in diameter, that's to get this high propulsive efficiency. Now, in the piston engine, the airflow is needed for combustion, cooling the oil, and cooling the engine coolant in a liquid-cooled engine, or cooling the cylinders with radial engines, really just like a large motorbike. Now, inline engines were supposed to be favoured for high-speed fighters because of the lower frontal area and lower drag. And the radial engine was widely used for lower speeds because of the larger frontal area, also the advantage of being shorter. Now, the thing was that we find that the British, the Americans, and the Germans all finished up with basically different design philosophies. In the UK, the inline engine was very heavily favoured and liquid cooled. In the US, exactly the opposite. Virtually all radial engines and all air cooled. And in Germany, there was a more even split. And in fact, a lot of the German aircraft that had inline engines, if you just looked at them, they looked like radial engines because of the way the Germans developed annular radiators around the front of the engine. So there was a total difference in design philosophy. Now, some years ago, I did a talk for the Discovery Channel. I got involved with a man from the US Navy who pointed out that the US Navy never operated a liquid-cooled engine aboard a ship, because they thought they were more complicated and difficult to maintain at sea. Now, who were the principal makers? Well, in the UK, there was Rolls-Royce and Bristol and Napier. Napier were a much smaller operation than either of these. Rolls-Royce were much the biggest. In the US, there were three major manufacturers: Pratt & Whitney, Wright, and Allison. In Germany, Daimler-Benz, Junkers, and BMW. Back a minute. Now, it turned out that roughly, to the best of putting numbers together, I could come up with, in Britain, it was probably about 80% inline to 20% radial. In the US, it was about 90% radial, 10% inline. And in Germany, fairly similar, possibly 50-50, 60-40, something like that, but not a clear difference. Now, here is an inline installation, and I should say that round this, just over there, a lot of the pictures I took around here, and next time you're at the unit at the museum, have a look at some of the things close up. Now, this is the installation on the Lancaster. So you see the big air intake here. Well, guess what? That isn't the air intake. The air intake to the engine is that, a little one on the other side. And that came as a complete shock to me. Here's the Spitfire. This is a later Spitfire. There's the air intake for the combustion air here, and here is the air for cooling the oil and the cylinder and the cylinders. Unfortunately, the lighting of this is not good. The Typhoon is here, and this I would implore you, you're going to see this fairly soon, because we have one of only two Typhoons left in the world, is on loan from the RAF Museum at Hendon. I'll have a better picture later, but this thing has got this enormous great chin intake here, and you're going to think, hang on a minute, we were talking about low frontal area for an inline engine on a fighter, and this looks pretty awful. Here's a typical low-speed Lysander. It's not a very interesting picture actually, but you see the exhaust is collected here and comes out there, and the air intake is some little scoop down here, and the cylinders are cooled by the finned cylinders, like you see in a motorbike. This is the radial installation on a typical US Navy fighter, and the cylinders here are cooled by the air coming in here. This is the cooling air for the oil, and these two are the air intakes for the actual engine itself. So you see in all of these cases that a very small percentage of the air coming on board is in fact used for combustion. Now here we see the Lancaster, repeating this picture again, it's slightly different, right in front. But here is this, here, the big hole that everyone would think is the air intake, including me. And these two here are the actual air intakes. So what happens behind that? Well, here, you see now, here's the engine here, the coolant is brought down here, and this chunk here is the radiator for cooling the coolant. This chunk here is the air for cooling the oil, and you can see the picture here now. Here is your radiator system here, and your nacelle, the big opening is down here, and the air intake to supercharger is at the back of the engine here on all the British engines and the American engines. We'll see something different in a minute. So that again shows the same picture, just to emphasize that that's the air required for cooling both the coolant and the oil, and that is the air required actually for combustion. So compare that to a jet engine, where virtually all the air coming in the front is going to propulsion. Here's the Hurricane, and this again is taken here. Here you can see the air intake for the engine, the Merlin engine, back up to the supercharger here at the back of the engine, the exhaust here. And this is the large radiator for cooling both the oil and the coolant. Again, similar view to the Spitfire, but here's your cooling for the oil and cylinder cooling, and here's the air for combustion. And that was very much smaller on the original Spitfires. In fact, the original Spitfire Mark I had one, it was asymmetric, one large radiator here and one small radiator there. I can't remember which was which. Now here's the Spitfire again. Again, this shows you the air intake. Now this is the air coming in here, up through the back of the engine here, and then out through the exhaust here. And this is your big cooling radiators for the oil and air. And it's interesting to remember, those of you who remember the war, how many aircraft you hear were lost as they were hit in the glycol system. So that if you got a hit from a bullet in the cooling system, the airplane was generally lost. So that was why the radial engine was in fact much better in terms of battle damage. So this is an interesting one. This is the Messerschmitt 109, and this is again from here. Here is your intake for the oil cooling and the cylinder cooling. And this thing here, about the size of a good-sized coffee mug, is the air intake. And that was actually a fairly standard field feature on German inline engines. And I couldn't work out why this one. It seemed like a funny, odd way to do it. These were inverted V engines, so the exhaust was on the bottom here. I actually, having puzzled over this a bit, came to me a second visit to the museum and found out why this was so. This here shows the German engine here, and the supercharger on this was in fact not running in the with this in the driving axis here. It was at right angles, and the flow came into the through the side of the engine, and the supercharger was on the side at right angles to the and it was driven by some kind of mechanical device. But you can see there's the intake there, and you'll see that on all manner of German airplanes, very standard as a fitting. 8109 again. Now, this is one of my pet peeves. I think it's a total disgrace that the mosquito that we have in this museum is stored in the junk hangar. This was one of the best aircraft of World War II. Quite a brilliant and versatile design. A lot of them built in Canada, and that should be one of the prize of our collection here, and it's stuck in the what I call the junk hangar. Now, if you look at the mosquito, the Merlin engines here, there is your air intake there for the combustion, the exhaust here, and this here is the radiator for cooling both the oil and the cylinders. It's a very good low drag installation. Now this is the Mustang with the Rolls-Royce Merlin. The RAF actually ordered the Mustang, built at a huge height by North American with the Allison engine, and when they got the Allison powered Mustang, they found that it was absolutely useless at altitude, didn't do any poor supercharger. But when they re-engined the Mustang with the Merlin, which was built by Packard in the US, it was a world beater. This here is the air intake under the spinner here, along here, and the next one here, you can see, here is your air intake, your supercharger is back here, the exhaust here, and then here you have this massive radiator under here for cooling the oil and the coolant. Now the interesting thing about that was this was the first time that people realized that if you were actually dissipating a lot of heat into this flow coming through here, you could possibly get thrust from that. And they did a lot of development on this radiator system here on the Mustang to actually get thrust. But to the best of my knowledge, they never actually produced any useful thrust, but they did counteract most of the drag. So it was a pretty good system. This here is in fact the Allison engine on with the air brought in along here, and there's a downdraft carburetor here. And now one of the interesting things on here, if you look at it carefully, it says here ice guard. And to me, that was a perfect way to collect ice and block off the air into the engine. I think it must be designed by somebody who lived in Texas or somewhere where they didn't know what ice was. But that is the old P-40 Tomahawk. We did have one of these here once, it's probably somewhere in the junk hangar now. But there is the air intake here for the carburetor, and this is the coolant radiator, and that is the oil radiator there. So again, the thing was, a lot of air was brought in, and it had basically 3 different functions and separate air systems for each. Now, the picture of the Typhoon, I think it's a better picture that follows it. It's very dark, but this is this great big chin intake here. And this is what's really interesting. This is the actual air intake system to the Typhoon. I sit back there and crossed over the rope and acted with the flash. I'm going to give you a picture of this here. This big chin intake under the Typhoon. This is this great big circular thing that hangs in there. This represents the air going to the engine for combustion. This represents the air for cooling the oil. And this monstrous big annulus around here is for cooling the coolant. We do also have a Napier Sabre engine in the collection here. The Sabre was actually the most powerful British engine built during the war. Now, this interesting thing here, this is the Sea Fury, and there was this widespread belief in Britain that radial engines were not suitable for high-speed fighters. There was one man, Sir Roy, will come back to me, Fedden, who firmly believed you could make a radial engine, cowl it properly, and get a high-speed fighter. And what happened was that the RAF shot down Focke-Wulf 190, and the remains of that, it was pretty well intact, were examined by Fedden, and he came to the conclusion that it was a very, very clever design, and he based the Sea Fury on that. Now, I must have done slight bit diversion, brings to mind the story of the Polish Air Force officer who was interviewed by the BBC, and the announcer asked him, "Captain Smilowski, what was your most frightening experience?" He says, "Well, I was flying my Spitfire at 10,000 feet, and this fucker, he gets on my tail." And the appalled announcer says, "Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, Captain Smilowski, of course, meant the fucker Wolf 190. No, this fucker even in the Messerschmitt." So, anyway, this is actually, basically this design with the exhaust taken out here was basically stolen from the Fokker Wolf 190. And this here is the actual air intake to the engine. And it's just on one side, I think, I don't have pictures right in den, but and this here, there are two of these, one on each side, is again for cooling the oil and the coolant. And that's a beautiful, clean design. You can see that there. That's it. And particularly if you compare the frontal area of that with the Typhoon, which is also a Hawker aeroplane, this is clearly a much neater design. The Corsair, which was a US aircraft, carrier-based, it had here's the air for cooling the cylinders through here, and one of these fed the air into the supercharger, and the other cooled the oil. So that was, again, a fairly complicated installation. What was really interesting was the Thunderbolt, which was the first one to introduce turbocharging. And this is the best picture I could get. But you have the radial engine here, and the turbocharger is away back here, nowhere near the engine, and the air is brought back here through the turbocharger, exhausted there, and the air is compressed back up here into the engine. You can see the turbocharger exhaust here, and that was the first. It was Stanford Moss at GE, who was the basic pioneer of designing turbochargers. And it looks, if you look at it now, it seems like a daft way to do it, but it was a case of fitting it in somehow where nobody thought of it in the first place. The Lightning, Lockheed Lightning, was similar. The turbocharger is back here, and in fact, you quite often in pictures of Lightning from above, you can see the exhaust from the turbocharger here, but the bellow and the radiators, the cooling radiators in the Lightning are way back here in the tail booms. So again, quite a complicated airflow path to get the air in and out. Typical radial engine for low-speed aircraft, that was the Beaufighter. We had a Beaufighter here that I think it's rack and ruin, but it might get redone someday. But this is the air intake for the carburetor up here, and well, I think for both the carburetor and the oil cooling there. And again, I showed you this picture earlier of the installation on the Wildcat, and that was a kind of standard installation on American aircraft like the B-29 and the B-17 and so on. So, but one of the important things was damage to tolerance for warplanes. The liquid cooled, many were lost due to hits on the cooling system. But radial engines, there was no cooling system, the fin cylinders, and there were apparently reported cases during World War II of piston engine aircraft actually returning with a piston, with a cylinder knocked off, and they could still keep running. And the US Navy never operated a liquid-cooled engine in World War II. Now, the radial engine was much more widely used for transports, and both radial inline used for fighters and bombers. And this is some of the inline liquid Lancaster, Mosquito, Spitfire, Mustang, ME-109, Lightning. Radial, B-17, 24, 29, Thunderbolt, Corsair, Bullfighter, and the Stirling. I didn't actually mention the Sea Fury there. Anyway, that's just some examples of all these aircraft. The other interesting thing was, because the Americans really went all the way with the radial engine and very much less on the inline engine, and that became what was used in transport aircraft, whereas the British had concentrated on inline engines. It turned out that really for transport aircraft, the radial engine was a much better solution and much more reliable. And you stop and think of it, many of these aircraft in World War II, the aircraft may be shot down within 20, 50 hours. So lots of engines, to the best of my knowledge, the most sorties flown by a Lancaster was 120. So that you're really talking about quite low operating hours on the engines, particularly as many of these aircraft, if they operated 100 sorties, would have many engine changes. So that there was really probably a good operating life for a piston engine in World War II might have been 200 hours. We're now talking about 40,000 hours before coming off the wing. But anyway, here's just a comparison of the speeds of starting off the Merlin Spitfire and AFW-190, the radial was faster. The BF-109 and the Thunderbolt was faster. Mustang and Tempest, the same. Focke 190 and the Corsair, the same. And the Griffon Spitfire and the Sea Fury was faster. So in fact, there was definitely, in the long run, basically no difference in the speeds of radial-powered aircraft and piston and inline. So much for the wonderful idea that it had to be inline engine because of low frontal area for high-speed fighters. And all you really got to do is look at the Typhoon to see that's got a... The Tempest was in fact radial engined as well. There were two versions of the Tempest, one radial, one inline. But that was all, I took it all from the same source, so it was sort of as neutral as it could get. But I think the final conclusion you come to is really there was no difference in the speed of radial engine fighters. And in fact, one of the later Focke-Wulf 190, the long nose Focke-Wulf 190, it was in fact an inline engine, although it looked like a radial. And I think that was the inline, yes, the inline Focke-Wulf 190. And then, of course, there was no further development after World War II. The radial was used for all the US civil transports, DC-6 and 7, Stratocruiser, Constellation. And that was why, to a large extent, the British, immediately after the war, started looking at gas turbines, the Dart and the Avon for the Comet and the Viscount. And they were actually first into the civil jet field, but that didn't last for all that long. So that's all I've got to say. I'd be glad to answer any questions, and we'll see if you think what I said was a load of rubbish. Any questions? Okay, well,
thank you very much, Herb.
Okay.
Sorry, I snuck in behind you there.
Oh, I see.
Thank you very much for the great presentation, and I will say, as far as I know, the Bristol Bullfighter is still in the restoration hangar. They're doing a complete rebuild on it. I believe they finally got engines. I feel like they traded another museum and they had some engines. So eventually, we'll see the Bullfighter back in its glory, but you're right, the Mosquito will probably stay in the junk hangar. And with that...
As I said, said before, in Glasgow they used to say, don't clap, throw money. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know,